the resolution itself? Maybe we deal with that while we wait for attendees to join.
We need to make sure that we have a designated person, member of the committee, who will write the resolution. So we will make sure of that. Okay, it looks like we have 2 new members who just joined, or maybe even 3.
I think we just reached quorum.
Hello.
Okay. Mike, can you confirm that we have the applicant for 900 Broadway on the call?
Yeah, it looks like we do. I believe Jacqueline is from their team. I'll promote her to a panelist.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's get going with this meeting. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. My name is Leila Logiziko. I'm the chair of the Landmarks Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. We are here tonight for our first hybrid meeting. I apologize actually for not being in person at the board office with my colleagues, but the short notice prevented me from rearranging my schedule, and I am out of town, but want to really express my gratitude to the members of the committee, including the new members who are brand new. This is their first committee meeting, for being so flexible and so understanding of those changing circumstances. A few words about how the meeting is going to proceed tonight. We have 2 applications. Each applicant will be given the opportunity to give a full and uninterrupted presentation. This presentation will be given remotely, so we will be able to follow on the computer. This meeting is recorded, and a recording will be available for replay for those who are interested. Once the presentation by the applicant concludes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions. We will do this in an orderly fashion, where members of the committee who are in person will raise their hand physically, and Brad will notify me of that. And those who are attending remotely will use the raise hand function of the Zoom platform. Once the question period concludes on the part of the members of the committee, I will open up to members of the public. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments to the application. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond to these comments and questions. And then we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. The applicant or members of the public are no longer allowed to speak unless recognized by the chair. Members of the committee during business session will discuss the application. A motion will be made and taken to a vote. This vote will then be presented to the full board of Community Board 5. I will tell you the exact date of the full board meeting in this cycle. And at the full board meeting that is in July, the full membership of the board will vote on the motion that was passed tonight. It is the vote of the full board that becomes the official position of Community Board 5. This official position will then be forwarded to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, as well as the elected officials who have jurisdiction over this particular property. So once again, thank you so much. I want to acknowledge that this is the new cycle of appointments for Community Board 5. So I want to welcome warmly all our new members. I know that some of them are actually not able to be with us tonight, given the short notice. But certainly we welcome all of you and very much look forward to working with you. As I indicated in a prior email, We will organize an orientation session. So, don't be afraid if you feel that, you're a little lost tonight. It is totally understandable. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Raise your hand. We're here to help and educate all members, old and new. We know that there's a big learning curve with this committee. So with all of that being said, we will start the meeting with an application for 455 Madison Avenue. This is an application to modify the existing design of a courtyard paving. And we have Richard with us, who is here with the applicant. Richard, I don't know if you're joined by others on your team, but we are ready for your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe it's just me flying solo tonight. I don't think anyone's joining on my end. So I'm representing, the Latte team and EDG. So thank you, Leila, and thank you, team. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Do you want me to share the screen? Is that
Yes, please.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, you should be able to share the screen.
Okay? Excellent. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, excellent. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, let me begin. So Latte New York Palace, we're looking to redo the ground cover for the courtyard for this historic location. It's located here between 50th and 51st on Madison Avenue. This is just a look from Madison at the corner of 50th. Just gonna sure everyone's aware of its location on the east side. This sits across from St. Patrick's. It's a very sort of well-known piazza in the city. Historical significance dates back to the late 1880s. Joseph Wells from McKim and White was sort of instrumental in the design of this building. It was really McKim White, and I'm sure many of you know this, sort of the foray more into classicization, Italian Renaissance classicization. So the building was a kind of real representation of that. It was the Villard houses, and this courtyard sat right in the center of this three-part building off Madison Avenue. So very sort of significant location. This is a shot from 1885 rather. And here you can kind of see the courtyard in this form. Try to zoom in here. You can see it has a sort of grassy center around which the carts would come in off of the main avenue around, dropping people off at the three sides. And then in the four corners, the rounded corners on each side, those were also little grassy sections bounded by stone. The mansion is a brownstone originally. I think the designs Wells wanted something more in the granite realm, but the mansion is a brownstone. And then the ground cover in this area here, this is obviously more of a gravel. Later on, we see a sort of a unit paver that comes into play in the building. And then in the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, there's a smaller sort of unit paver measure. We'll see it in some later photos here. Here in this photo, you can see some cars, some bollards in the center. And then some later photos, you can kind of start to see a unit paver, and still sort of taking the same configuration, keeping the rounded corners with central motif. In this case, you kind of see a diamond pattern. And you see the shot on the left with St. Patrick's obviously across the street, shot on the right, 1938, both shots from 1938 of the mansion. Here again, this is a little bit more of a close-up showing the full field effect. So nothing necessarily too figural, we'll say, at the center. And then again, an earlier shot juxtaposed from 1885 on the right with the grass, and then without the grass with the paver. And then some earlier shots again, just from the street. And then jumping ahead a little bit to the 80s, you can start to see something that's introduced that's a lot different, sort of a departure from the more grassy and smaller unit paver to something much more bold, much more colorful, and sort of takes on perhaps a much more identifiable sort of signature in the space. And then there's the introduction of some planters within the space. And these are sort of a larger unit paver that you can kind of see here. Very colorful, very bold. And it stays like that for some time. And then it goes into another larger unit paver with 4 large planters around the central circle. This is just a floor plan of that. The scheme was approved in 2013. And then this is just some shots under the current bridge showing it in that final form, essentially with the larger brown stone pavers. You can see here. So essentially the remnants or the residue of that central form, but here, bounded by smaller unit pavers around the planters, always kind of keeping that form. Some close-up shots of that. This is a shot of the stairs, also brownstone, so it still retained the brownstone stairs at each location. And now I'm going to jump to the inspiration of really where we want to take the piazza. This is the Campidoglio in Rome. You have had the pleasure of visiting the site. Michelangelo originally designed the 3 edifices and the piazza. The piazza wasn't finished until much later, but this particular piazza that's on the promontory, it sort of takes the geometry. This isn't quite a C shape or sort of orthogonal bounding of this piazza, much like the Lotte, but the scale-wise is very similar. This is more trapezoidal, and in this scheme, this sort of fills the trapezoid with an oval that has travertine and a granite paver. It pulls together and kind of stitches together between the 3 facades. And it's sort of Italian Renaissance setting. So this was sort of a departure point and inspiration point that we had talked a lot with the hotel, that doing something that was sort of appropriate for this very important piazza in the city of New York. Something that sort of harkens back to, some of the initial thrusts and the things that were being, talked about and discussed by Kim Mead-White, and the sort of understanding of Italian Renaissance as a sort of departure point. So it's very sort of important to sort of look at something that was aligned with that, and then sort of bringing that language forth into our own thinking, this plaza. And so really what we sort of ended up at here was keeping the 4 rounded corners in all quadrants, again, very much in keeping with the original, and then putting something back in that same central area, perhaps in this case, slightly larger than the original grass, where the carts went around and dropping off at each entry. But taking as a departure point that geometric language that was drawn from the sort of Italian Renaissance, keeping it rather simple, but sort of stitching together something in the center that would kind of hold its own, but not being too bold, not being too flashy or colorful. And then using a similar kind of tonal set of materials, kind of harking back to that. Originally, I mean, the building was going to be a sort of granite. That was the thinking of Wells. We also want something that, is robust and kind of can withstand the elements. And so in the 4 corners, you have a smaller unit paver, similar to, harking back to yesteryear. And then also within the central motif, we're looking at a glacial limestone, something that's very, very hard, similar to that sort of travertine color, a little bit lighter in the palette than the brownstone, using a smaller granite paver within that motif. And then outside the diameter of the circle, that would also be a granite paver, but a larger format granite paver that would follow the concentric rings of that central motif. This is just an overhead view here. So you can see the sort of granite little paver on the outside, the larger paver, keeping the sandstone stairs as they are. And then, you know, bounding all of the kind of edge geometry, very much in keeping with, you know, what Wells was doing, just by kind of carrying that all the way around as a boundary condition. And then there's the central motif as we show it, all done in the same limestone. And the thinking with these materials is to do then, this is just jumping to the actual materials we're thinking of here. This is a Portuguese limestone, again, very, very dense limestone, and then a flamed granite. So you can see the two here juxtaposed against the brownstone. So something a little bit lighter for, again, the geometry, and then something a little darker to contrast, which would be the granite. So the bottom one is again the granite, smaller paver and larger paver, and then the limestone would be again the motif in the banding. And then again a sort of dusk shot from Madison Avenue. So see it here looking northward. So the larger pavers would ring the central motif, and again the smaller unit paver within the boundary of the geometry at the center, and then you can see the edges. The furniture, don't pay attention to the furniture, it's all loose furniture. Essentially the only really fixed pieces that we're really wanting to sort of look at are the four planters. We do want to obviously maintain the four planters that are in there, but perhaps to sort of lessen the size of those planters within the overall courtyard. Right now, they're really kind of bundled. Right? And I'm just going to jump ahead or back to the one slide. You can see they're very much kind of bounded at the center. They're very, very large. They're about 5.5 feet tall. What we want to do is make them a little bit smaller and then push them to the edges just slightly. And take advantage perhaps of subsuming the roof ball within the ground cover. So jumping back here, you can kind of see those planters that I was speaking of here. And then just a sort of simple line drawing of the overall in that image there. And so on the left, this is what is there today, and then our proposition for what's to come on the right. It was really sort of important to sort of have something that would really integrate well with this sort of Italianate Renaissance ideal. Have something that kind of stand on its own, but also integrate well. Often every year, really, they put a large festive tree in the center, and we wanted something that wouldn't necessarily get covered over, but could kind of play nicely with the very large tree that's there every season. Something that would be appropriate for events that are held in there for the public. It's a pop space, so just having something that is very much in keeping with the ethos of what Wells was going for, and so really this is the proposition. It's rather simple, and I hope I did it justice and by describing the sort of simple moves we're trying to make. But yeah, that's essentially the long and short of it.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard. Let's jump right into questions. Brad, I'm going to need your help with that. If you can call the names of those who have their hand up, who are in attendance in person, who have questions.
Everyone in person?
Cool. I actually do have a question. It's a design question. Just curious of why you chose the 8-pointed star rather than the sunburst that's used at Capitol Hill.
It just sort of was a design choice to kind of move a little bit of as a departure, but yeah, I mean we're open to interpretation. It's not necessarily, you know, sacrosanct in any way. It just was a sort of, this is the initial thrust, and it's sort of been something we've been in discussion with the hotel and kind of banding it back and forth, but always sort of open to interpretations and things. So we're not wed necessarily to this in any way, but this is the sort of overall sort of arching idea to date, we'll say.
Thank you. Next question.
Barbara?
Can you go back to the original photos? I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah.
To see. Okay. So it was something that was not quite as graphic as then the treatment that was developed in the 80s.
Correct.
original.
Yeah. This is the one. These
Right.
sort of knot forms. Yeah.
And that's there still today?
No. What is there today is this here. This is a line drawing
right.
of
Yeah.
the larger unit paper, and so this is essentially what's there today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a smaller geometry at the center, and these very large planters that again are, you know, chest height, that are scattered throughout there. So you have the four that bound the center, and then you have smaller ones on the periphery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have a question. Can you actually speak to the materials that are being used? It seems from the sample that you're showing that the element that is at the center is actually tiles, whereas the periphery is granite pavers. Can you just speak
Sure.
to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to just jump to that shot. So these are just samples. So they would actually, in fact, be probably 4 inches deep, just for the sake of receiving these from the various quarries. We have to keep them small because the grades would get rather heavy. So the actual granite paver would be about 4 inches deep. The limestone probably the same depth. This is a honed limestone. And then just because we're also very concerned about slippage. So we want to have something that has a low slip coefficient, and then has a bit of tooth to it as well. And then the granite itself is flamed. And so it's even a little rougher than the limestone. But they would be smaller, almost cobbles essentially. So a unit of potentially a 6x6 or a 5x5 that's 4 inches deep. And then the limestone, you can quarry these rather large. So we started to look at, where the seam lines would go, certainly where the geometry kind of comes together, but you can kind of see it in here. This would be a smaller unit of measure on the center. And then around the central circle, they would follow consecutively, working out where it's the same kind of larger kind of round curves. And then in the corners would be the same sort of smaller paver as well. So, shot.
Okay, and just to clarify, the granite that is at the periphery is the same stone as the one you're using for the motif.
Yes, so the
Or is it
lighter
just
lime,
a stone?
the lighter limestone, the
No,
motif.
I'm
of the granite-
talking about the granite.
The granite is all the same. It's the same granite, whether it's a smaller paver or a larger paver, it's all the same.
Okay,
So within the motif is the same granite as the circular field as is in the, it's all the same granite.
okay,
Yeah.
that's and just to clarify, the sandstone that you are showing for the steps, is this also part of the application? Are you replacing this, or are you
We
keeping
would,
what is
we
existing?
would keep it. Yeah, we would replace it in kind. You can see some of the stairs here. They're in disrepair. So what we would like to do is put back pieces. They actually opened up the quarry. We're actually doing the facade work. And in that process of redoing the facade with cornice and so forth, they actually opened up the quarry to cut new stones. And so our intent is to actually put back exactly what's there. So we would, the really bad pieces, the pieces in disrepair, we would look to restore it exactly as it is today.
So if I remember correctly, I mean, I know that you guys came to us, I want to say 2 years ago, and we actually had a lengthy discussion about the type of stone that you were using, and you were exploring, like it sounded like LPC was favoring a stone from China, which was an option that you were not really favoring. And so how did that get resolved, and what stone did you end up? Because I hear that you are reopening a quarry. So is that that you located
understanding.
a local, like domestic stone?
Domestic, correct. Yeah, from the quarry where the stone came from is where we got the stone for the facade. And so we would carry that same stone for these stairs.
Okay, that's excellent. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Next question.
Yeah, just a quick one. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the timeline for this operation and how it might affect the operations of the hotel and whatever the other, I believe in the west wing of the mansion, there used to be a retail business in there separate from the hotel. I'm not sure if it's still there, but that
correct.
was.
Yeah, on the, what we have, so on this side over here, actually on the north side, it was the Trunk Club. It was Nordstrom's Trunk Club, and they had all floors all the way up. They are, I believe, still leasing the space, but I believe they are going to be moving out shortly. And then the other sides, the east side, top of page top and page right, that's all run by the hotel, various offices and meeting rooms and conference rooms and things like that. So the portion of page left, which is north, that will be, coming back to the hotel. And I'm not 100% sure how they're going to sort of break that up, but I think what they'd like to do in this sort of interim process, all of the scaffolding in the courtyard that you saw in those photos is still there, and we're finishing off the facade probably sometime in August, September. And so what we'd like to do is to try to get things to a place where we could potentially start next spring if we could on the courtyard. And so the timeline is probably about 4 months or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for members of the committee, especially new members, the question that is in front of us tonight is really whether this particular alteration is appropriate. It's actually the name of the certification that the applicant is seeking. They're seeking a certificate of appropriateness. So, the core question really for us, as much as, we do get involved in, the construction and those kinds of questions, but really the core question for us tonight is whether this particular design is appropriate for this particular location, and also as it relates to the rest of the building, because of course the entire building is an individual landmark. Great. Next question.
Suzanne.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I used to work in this building. I love the building. And I wanted to go back to something that you said, and then I'll wrap it into a question, Leila, I promise. And you were talking about the piazzas in Rome and how the architect and the builders early on, or in the late 1800s, when they built the palace, talked about this, but they didn't actually do this. And so now you're revisiting this language, which was not actually instituted in the original design, in order for the plaza to pop and look more colorful, which it absolutely does. But you were talking about a goal, and I know that our goal also is in terms of the integration of the plaza for the historic ethos of the building. Can you talk a little bit about how this really does integrate? Can you hear me?
Richard, were you able to hear Suzanne's question?
It looks like he might be frozen.
I think
honestly.
he is. I froze him. Layla, I froze him. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Yikes. And I don't have a phone number for Richard. Okay, it looks like he was logged off. No, he wasn't.
I dropped out there.
You should.
Can you hear me?
And.
We can hear you.
Oh,
He is.
here you're back, Richard. Can you hear us? I know he's frozen again.
Sorry about that. I get, it looks, I think we're back. Hello?
We can see you and hear you. It looks very I don't know, it looks like your connection may not be ideal.
Yeah,
Do you
whatever.
want to shut down your video so that
sure.
we can hear you?
My apologies. Yes.
Okay, great. Let's do it this way, hoping that we can go through the questions, and then if need be, we will get the visuals back if we have any specific questions that require that. Did you have a chance to hear Suzanne's question, Richard?
Yes, I got to the part, sort of the last part, it dropped out about the sort of initial architect's thinking of the space, of the materials and so forth, and then it dropped out. So my apologies.
So Suzanne, do you want to reformulate your question?
I'm so sorry.
I'll just re-ask it. I was going to just ask Richard, if you just had mentioned, I'm just thinking about the appropriateness. And so you had talked about how in the piazzas in Rome and how the palace was designed, and that the original architects had talked about, but they actually didn't implement some of the language that now you're revisiting, and we'll see it in your presentation, so that the courtyard is more poppy and more colorful. And it is definitely that. And I'm just asking, you had talked about more than once how this integrates with the palace. And so I wanted you to just elaborate for me and the rest of the group, how it does in fact integrate, because it does look poppy. It does look colorful. And I'm just wondering about the integration with this building.
Sure.
I work in this building. I love the building. Thanks.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you for the question. Great question. When you look at the sort of historical, images, when the part, well, early on, when you see this image, it's actually, it's really just a sort of gravel way for the carts to come around the central ring. And that ring was actually elevated. And so it was really a grassy ring with the four corners also slightly elevated in their frames. And so it was really more about this sort of, perambulation of these vehicles coming around. And so it was more the theater of that sort of display more than anything. I think, they had some materiality in there, but it was very much about, the sort of very manicured, grassy forms framed. And so it was very much about the sort of utility of that movement, of that dropping off. And so it wasn't necessarily so much about any sort of embellishment necessarily. I think that was more imposed later on by others. And so it wasn't necessarily Wells who kind of implemented any sort of decoration or anything, but I think perhaps in the sort of understanding from an architect's perspective, if you remove horse and buggy, remove cars, remove the having to park in this thing, that the preoccupations that someone like Wells would have, is particularly in a firm like McCann Mead and White, that there's a real, even Mead, who was more the classicist, in the discussions that they would have, it was very much about bringing that kind of order. And then the other two really followed suit to that firm about this kind of classicization. And I think that through that, I believe that someone like that would sort of look at the ground cover as an opportunity later on to perhaps, especially looking at someone like Michelangelo, who's, this sort of the rock star we still talk about 600 years later, that they would do something perhaps, not too intense, but something that would kind of harken back to this kind of ornamentation and decoration. Now being able to remove the car and the buggy from the equation, it's really just about people on the piazza. But we kind of feel like this really kind of speaks to, the roundels and the sort of monument that he built, and that, someone like Wells would have kind of appreciated, the granite coming back on the ground cover, and in introducing something that would have a bit more decoration, we'll say, that kind of, does look back to the Renaissance. So.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, next question. We need to maybe bring this question period close to an end.
Barbara?
Any more questions? Yeah, I just had I want to just ask a question about the color choice for the granite, because it's very gray, and I was wondering if you looked at other colors for the granite, something that maybe had more of a brown cast to it, which would be closer to the original.
We did, in fact, we studied it in quite a few renderings. We looked at the limestone. The limestone out of this particular quarry has a multitude of colors. So it, some verge on the very, very creamy, all the way to sort of the very gray. We felt that we were looking at also some granites that were more on the brown, but it sort of had this kind of homogenized look where it was all very sort of matchy. And in fact, before this presentation, some of the discussions we had with people from Landmarks, that the center actually had more of a kind of more browny limestone, and there was an earlier version where the granite was a little browny, but it started to all look a little muddy. And so we wanted something where you had the granite acting much like, the street beyond and the sidewalk, and it kind of had a kind of uniformal sameness with that language, albeit with the sort of tailored qualities, beyond the bounding line of the gate. And so we're doing the curves, we're doing the smaller unit measure, that it's not just kind of, fields of gray, and that having then the limestone as something then other than the building also allowed it to pop a little bit. But, definitely would love to look at that more if that was something that, we could share with you for sure. Earlier renditions that we did where we were exploring these things. But this was a sort of where we arrived, where it was a kind of nice balance of things, where the building was its own thing. The gray was really the kind of neutral zone. And then we just allowed the limestone just to pop, just to be a little bit of a lighter feel than the building itself. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any more questions from members of the committee?
I have a few, if I could, Leila.
Yes, of course.
Okay. First question, is there anything original in this plaza that or courtyard that's remaining?
Would be the steps.
Okay.
And the benches that you see beyond. Those are long benches by the gates, and then the steps themselves.
Okay, and so the pavers that you're removing in order to install these ones, can you talk a little bit about sort of the depth of that removal and also kind of the extent as it relates where it abuts existing conditions? How is that being handled?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. You can see a lot of cracking happening here, and that's probably due, well, partly they move a lot of vehicles through here. They move some booms, and it's a very active space. So what we would like to do is put back, obviously, the appropriate drainage, so you're not getting ponding water that creates cracking, but have a paver with a unit of measure that can take vehicles driving on boom trucks, larger vehicles and things. These are a larger format throughout the center and along the edge, so we would be looking to put back something like that in a larger field. But the thickness of the material, so the removal of this, there are some areas at the corner where there are double height grates that go down below, but for the most part, this is on grade. And so we would look to remove this material. And I'm not sure how thick all of the material is, but just given some of the cracking and things, it's probably not as thick as it needed to be. The smaller ones obviously pulled up a little bit better just by virtue of scale. But we would look to put back something, like I said, in the 4-inch range for all material, and then create proper drainage condition throughout the plaza. Yeah.
Actually, if you could hold on this, like this stair image right here. So, for example, where you're moving the pavers as they directly abut the stair, and as you're telling us, I think that you're going to have to dig a little bit further down in order to put in the new pavers. How are the existing stairs, and I mean, this also applies to the benches and everything else, how are those being treated? Are you going to be putting up temporary protection to kind of ensure that those aren't damaged, or how is that being dealt with?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great question. Where these directly abut, yes, everything will be protected, both the benches and the stairs. On this particular case, you can see where patches have been done. What we'd like to do is remove anything that has been patched, and we would like to bring it back to large format stones. There's a lot of wear and tear on the bull nose. It's a little hard to see. Zooming in here, you can see the corner patches. This is sort of long together. What we would like to do is really kind of clean this up and restore it back to what it was. At the edge condition where these meet, we'll have to do probes. Obviously, if it's very good stone, we will, have measures in place where we're handling everything, appropriately. What we'd like to do is go again back to the original kind of banding of things in these particular edges. I think where this granite meets the brownstone, we wouldn't do any of this particular banding there. But we would definitely look to protect all of the good stones, both at the bench and at the stairs, and make sure that we handle everything appropriately. In these corners, there are these sort of double height vaults that allow light into windows lower down. That really only happens on that one side. We would even look to fill those in if they're not needed. So it kind of unifies the overall look a little bit more, because right now it's a little bit disjointed in terms of its the overall configuration. It kind of interrupts it a little bit. So what we would like to do is work with the hotel to ensure that obviously if there are appropriate, windows that need to have, exhaust discharge and things like that, or access needed, we would obviously keep them, but we'd like to try to fill in the grades. But we're both architecture and engineering in-house, so we have a lot of structural engineers and restoration engineers. So we would make sure that whatever we're doing is going to withstand, the forces of cars driving on these things. We're all very sort of well versed in handling of these materials, and when we write the specifications and when we're working with trades and things, just making sure that everything's handled very well, and that we're not sort of disturbing or disrupting anything in a way that's going to cause damage to what is to remain.
Okay, thank you. And then final question, are there any impacts, positive or negative, to accessibility to any of these structures or the courtyard as a result of this renovation?
Yeah, in the end, I think what we're going to present here is going to be very ADA friendly across the courtyard. Right now, you can sort of see, over time, there's been a lot of sort of larger gaps, splits. You're going to have a much more smoother transition across the overall surface. It won't be as rough as this. We're going to, control the jointing. Everything will be put back much better. I mean, the technology's come a really long way. When you look at these quarries now, everything it's quite phenomenal how tight you can get the joints. So across the overall surface, we're certainly looking at it from an ADA standpoint. These pavers, there's a lot of ponding on here. There's a lot of water that just sort of sits, hence the cracks and things. But this current paver is a touch slippery side as well. So in general, you're going to have a much more sort of robust surface condition that's much tighter, much less textured in terms of, the lifts that people have to contend with in wheelchairs and things. And then also not having, ice forming and having people slip and things like
that. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the great questions. All right, unless there are more questions from members of the committee, I think we can move on to opening up to members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this particular application's questions or comments? If you are attending remotely on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. Any comments or questions from attendees who are with us tonight? Okay, seeing none. Brad, do we have any attendees who are attending in person and who wish to speak on this application?
No, there are no in-person attendees.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move to our business session. As I said, during business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. Applicants or members of the public are no longer permitted to speak unless recognized by the chair. So, especially for new members, let's frame this conversation a little bit. As I said, the applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness. So the main question for us is this proposed work appropriate to this particular location? As Brad indicated in his line of questioning, one big concern that we have is that we need to make sure that the work that is being proposed will not cause adverse impact to the existing historic fabric. So this is something that is very important. Then, the notion of appropriateness has some objective components, but also has, quite a bit of a subjective component. What we try to do very hard with this committee is actually to put some objective criteria when we review these applications. So to help with that, a few things that I wanted to point out. So very clearly, it is not a replica of the original condition. But at the same time, what is pretty striking with this particular property is that this particular plaza has changed design and paving a number of times. So I think that the question really that is in front of us is whether this particular design and material is appropriate for the rest of the building, rather than getting stuck to the fact that it is a veering from the original design. In terms of what defines appropriateness, we look at scale, we look at materials, we look at color, we look at design. So, this is more in the realm of, maybe a little bit of a subjective interpretation. But we're going to try not to rely too much on a personal taste, but find some argument and justification for the position that we are going to take. So that's for a little bit of framing. Now let's move to comments. You can raise your hand if you wish to speak, and Brad, if you can call on people, that would be great. So any comments?
Well, since I see none, I'll start.
Jump right in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think based on sort of the way that you've framed it, Layla, those sort of two criteria, it seems as though they're being sensitive towards the existing building and the existing structure. So I don't think I see many concerns on that front. And then as it relates to the existing design, like you pointed out, the building has changed and the courtyard has changed multiple times. And I don't think that this is an outlier from some of those prior designs. So to me, this doesn't seem to be sort of too big of an extreme of departure from the sort of varied history of what we've seen in the courtyard. So I think I would be in favor of this application being approved. Barbara.
Yeah, I actually feel quite differently about it. I guess, and it is subjective. I feel that it, not so much that I think it would be better to go back to the original design, but that in the 80s, yes, there was a very highly patterned plaza, but I think that really what the original architects were doing was creating a very neutral ground plane, which I really, to my mind, really helps to highlight the beauty of the buildings. To me, to my mind and my eye, it looks like it is competing now in the sort of bold graphic of that, which for some reason in this image looks like the to me it keeps reminding me of the Parks Department logo, but the Parks Department logo is different. But to me, it just feels like it's competing. I'm not. I also feel the color just seems a little off as well, but I think I personally would feel it would be more appropriate to see something that was a little less graphic and a little more neutral, that allows the plaza to kind of be sort of retreat a little bit. And by saying that, acknowledging that's not really what they wanted to do, but I guess to my mind, that would be more appropriate.
Yeah.
I sort of agree with Brad a little bit more, in that the original purpose of the neutral ground was for vehicles to come into. And that now we're in a very different time, and the idea of the blue gray, I think is sort of terrific because it's sort of more welcoming. It's the blue gray is more similar to the sidewalks around there. So it's sort of making it a little bit more part of the city. And then, of course, tying the color back in medallion and everything else. It just seems like this is something that, if this has been thought of as a pedestrian courtyard originally, something more interesting would have been done than just a driveway, which is what it was
I
before.
see, and I don't.
So we're not, guys, we're not going to do any cross conversations. We're going to really, keep it focused on the application. Other comments, and I will come back to you, Barbara. Other comments.
Suzanne.
Hi, I agree with Barbara. That was the genesis of my question. It wasn't really a historical nod as much as an inquiry about how this really integrates. I do not, this is subjective, I do not feel like this integrates by color, by design, I think that the courtyard should not be, the objective of the courtyard shouldn't match the sidewalk. I think it should be in keeping with the palace, which is a remarkable historic treasure, and that this courtyard completely distracts us from this beautiful courtyard. I'm not saying, and I worked in this building, I've seen how it is used, and it is a remarkable facility, and I applaud them for what they're trying to do. I think it is too poppy. I think it is too distracting, and I don't think it integrates.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, so it looks like we really have two camps that are forming. We need to hear more comments.
Kevin, I'm new to the committee and I just want to say I'm very impressed by the level of intellect of this conversation. So this might sound ignorant, so just please forgive me in advance, but it kind of gives me a sense of like the outside of the Louvre in Paris, where you have this very modern looking pyramid in contrast with the obviously much older building behind it. And you know, at first glance, it's an enormous contrast, but it still works. That was just the first thing that came to my mind for what it's worth.
Yeah, thank you. And listen, as a brand new member of the committee, I applaud you for making a comment. I think it took me like 4 months or 5 months when I joined the board to even dare speaking. So bravo just for that. And, very insightful comment. It is really, the same nature where we have, a pretty stark contrast. And it looks like it's stimulating the brain of our committee members, which is always great to see this kind of engagement. Okay, so it looks like we have two camps, so we can try to see if we can actually find some sort of common ground. The applicant has indicated that, he was willing to consider different versions of the design. So those who have this objection and who feel that this design actually competes with the building itself, do you feel that another version of this design may be more appropriate, or do you feel that altogether anything that would be contrasty and poppy would be not appropriate? Is there a way to find some sort of acceptable treatment? Which and I need also to preface that by saying that we are not the designers, and therefore, and although we have great architects on this committee, which is a blessing, our job is not to design for the applicant. So all of that being said, is there still a way to get consensus? And if we don't, which is totally fine. But if we can actually work towards consensus, that would be great.
Cool.
Yeah, just as I indicated before, and I'm gonna make the same apology in advance as Kevin did, being a new member. But I think you framed it very clearly, Leila, in terms of what appropriateness means. I'm not crazy about the design, as I pointed out, because I'm very familiar with Campodillo. I prefer the sunburst, not crazy about the color. But I don't see how it's not appropriate for what they want to do there.
Okay, thank you.
Can I? Were you about to speak, Leila, or can I? Make a
No,
comment?
go ahead.
One thing sort of to your point, Barbara, like if I were to take issue with something, for me, it would be sort of the I don't know what material is that, the limestone, the white, to me stands out. And to your line of questioning, if that were to become a little bit more unified with the facade of the building and maybe a little warmer and browner, maybe that would lessen the contrastiness of it, which is something that I wouldn't be opposed to, but I don't know if that satisfies sort of the concerns that you have.
Only partially. I mean, it was the gray, the darker gray as well, that I feel is a little not necessary. what I was saying is, was there something more that had more of a brown cast to it? Not necessarily brown, but sort of picked up a little bit, you know, and sort of drew from the facade as opposed to being quite so different, right? So it wasn't just the light color, it was the dark color as well. And the light color actually bothers me less.
Just to be clear, when we're talking about the contrast, is it, or the poppiness, is it the
So
design?
we're not going to do any cross conversations. We're in comments. So if you want to address a comment that has been made, you have to turn all your comments towards me, basically towards the chair of the committee. So.
I apologize, Layla. I called up Mark in the room, so that's my
so sorry. I didn't realize that. Sorry.
So, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
I just
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead, Mark.
our discussion about the poppiness, is it related to the color and the design? Or the, like, what are we looking at specifically? When you were talking about potentially making changes.
So once again, you know, we are in comments, so it is really up to those who have expressed concerns to tell us if they want to make any suggestions to, you know, reach a design that they would find acceptable or appropriate. Otherwise, I guess, you know, they will have to vote you know, consistent with their impression of this application, which, you know, it seems that they would be opposed to it. So I don't know, Barbara and Suzanne, if there are any specific changes that you would like to see for this application to be, you know, getting your vote of support, given that, you know, it looks like others seem to express support.
Layla, I can only say that as it exists right now, it would be very hard for me to approve it. I understand that they could make the colors maybe less contrasty, or the design maybe a little less busy. I don't really know that it's up to me to make that suggestion, but I do know that for me, for the job of what I think this application is in terms of it integrating with the purposefulness of this courtyard as part of the lot New York Palace, I do not feel as though this integrates in a way that keeps it the historic treasure that it is.
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful. All right. So it looks like we have two sides on this particular application, and yeah, I will take more comments, and otherwise we're going to have to basically bring this to a vote and just see where the vote stands. So are there any further comments?
I don't see any in the room, Layla.
Okay, all right. Then someone is going to have to make a motion. This motion will have to be seconded, and then it will be taken to a vote, and then we'll see where the committee stands on that.
It's Chuck. I move we approve the application.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, and the motion has been seconded. So Brad, do you want to take the vote?
Sure. Blake,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Hirschberg,
No.
Dick's not here, Johnson,
No.
Logisico,
Come back to me.
Miller,
Yes.
I myself am a yes. Spandorf,
No.
Stamberg,
Yes.
Zolkowitz.
Yes.
Motion passes, or sorry, what is your vote, Layla?
I will vote yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you to the applicant, and thank you to members of the committee for you know, looking very thoroughly at this application and sharing your thoughts and concerns. For new members of the committee, this is actually fairly unusual. We usually bring unanimous votes, but sometimes it's just not possible, which is totally fine. We need to try, but then if we don't succeed, then we just need to let the vote reflect how the committee felt about this particular application. So, once again, thank you all. All right, so moving on to the next item and the final item on the agenda tonight. We are reviewing 900 Broadway. It's an application to amend a master plan for the installation of replacement doors at the ground floor. And do we have the applicant for that? Oh, yes, Jacqueline, you have the floor. We're all yours.
Great, thank you so much, Chair Lagisco. I have one question, which is we also have the architect for this project. I want to make sure that he's a panelist, has been elevated panelist or whatever it's called as well.
What is
name
his
Al
or her name?
Alexander Neratov.
Sure. Let's see. Okay, he has been promoted as
Great. Thank you.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. So again, my name is Jackie Pudu-Vallon. I'm the preservation consultant on the project. I'm here tonight with Alexander Neratov, the architect. I'm just going to give a brief introduction and then hand it over to him. And let me just get to the presentation. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes,
it just looks like drawing sheets. Great. So, so again, this is 900 Broadway, a commercial building in the Ladies Mile Historic District, designed by McKim, Mead and White, built in 1886 to 87, and later altered by Manick and Frank in 1905. It's located on the east side of Broadway at the corner of East 20th Street, which you can see here in this little historic district map. The proposal you're seeing tonight is to amend the master plan on the building for the replacement of infill at the two-story base of the building. And by infill, I mean storefront infill as well as entrances. The master plan was approved by LPC in 2003. The proposed changes to the master plan are for the design of two doorways. So I'm just going to advance to another page. So here on this sheet, you can see the existing condition photo of the main entrance, where I'm circling here with my highlighter. These doors are on Broadway, and the elevation drawing of what was approved under the master plan is on the far left here. And on the right is the elevation for the current proposed door alteration. Now here we're looking at the service door. This is on East 20th Street. So this is its existing condition in this photo here in the lower left corner, as well as the photos above. And here is an elevation drawing showing you what the doors that were approved under the master plan look like. So I'm just going to try to zoom in on that without messing this up too badly. So this is the configuration that was approved under the master plan. Just went too far. And here is the current proposed service door replacement proposal. So here in this sheet, you can compare the existing condition, existing here on the left, to the proposed replacement doors at the service entrance. And with that, I would like to introduce the architect, Alexander Neratov.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. What's interesting about this building is that it's the original McKim, Mead and White project was a 6-story building, which was built with an entrance at the corner, and it had an internal stairway access to the corners of the upper floors. This building was built before elevators, except maybe there was a service elevator, we're not sure. Just a few years later, And also in the McKinley White configuration, the two storefronts on the Broadway side, the southernmost bays, those were storefronts, had individual entrances. And in the lower photograph, you'll see there's an awning over two of them that identifies them as kind of a separate store with two bays. So just a few years after the completion of this building, elevators came into use, the area developed, and Meineke and Frank added 4 floors to the building. There was a tremendous amount of structural reinforcement that was done internally to the building, and they moved the entrance to the southernmost bay of what you see in this photograph. They put in a different sort of entrance there. The elevator lobby for the upper floors was at that location. And the building functioned as an office building, a 10-story office building for decades until the mid-century in the 1960s, where most of the infill panels down below were redone in aluminum. There was some bright blue paneling over it. It became sort of a cacophony of pieces from different eras. But the remaining doors to the building and the elevators remained in the southernmost bay on Broadway. And there was some glass doors, glass transoms from probably dating back from the mid-50s or late 40s that are located there. In comparing the McKinley White approach, where the entrance was in the corner, with the Meineke and Frank approach, we thought that when we applied for a master plan to upgrade and renovate and to restore the infills, we thought that the Meineke Frank design for the entrance bay, which had a stone portico with 2 columns and a pediment, we thought that we would actually recreate that detail, so the one you see on the left. And this is what was approved. We're not aware there was anything underneath the aluminum that predated the mid-century details. So we thought entrance to the building, you use the design that was based on the change of configuration, and the rest we were trying to emulate the McKinley White design, hoping that we'd be able to restore most of this. The service bay actually is mostly intact from the original period, except for the 2 pairs of doors, which were 1950s doors or 1940s doors, industrial doors. So we had nothing to go by, no photographs. So we'll come back to that later. Then we, for the next decade, we focused on restoring this infill in pieces. The first focus of maybe 10 years after the master plan was the 2nd floor. And we did far more extensive studies of the existing fabric. We found that underneath the aluminum, particularly above the present entrance, we discovered that the McKinley White details actually existed in fairly good condition. The spandrel panels, again, most of them turned out were actually in place. Some of the little stars were missing, but basically they were present. So that was a great surprise. We also then asked Jablonski Conservation to do a electronic microscope study of the paint colors, and they discovered a very interesting original paint scheme from McKinley White days, which was a sort of a bronze colored facade covering. There was wood and cast iron with a clear lacquer finish with bronze powder suspended in the clear lacquer. And so Jablonski designed a finish using a multi-layered application of pigments and lacquers on the new windows that went into the second floor to mimic pretty closely what the original finish was. And then over the wood and the cast iron, we came up with an automobile paint that Jablonski also formulated to emulate this kind of shiny, slightly shiny finish of the original. We also found in looking then subsequently, as we were doing the second floor replacement, we found that there were some cast iron vertical elements that were underneath the aluminum entrance areas. And we think those may have been the original columns. We're not sure from McKimmie White or subsequent, but anyhow, there's cast iron there. No details on the columns that we could find. But then again, that was redone by Meineke Frank in 1905, so perhaps they would have stripped the details off. We were able to, so that the make cast iron replicas of the missing details on the windows. In the service bays, some of the details were not cast iron, they were tin. There were also some painted wood details that were original. So it was a mishmash, but whenever the material was, we replicated that very closely. And certainly for the entrance bay here, we would propose to recast it in cast iron because of the potential wear and tear. So the proposal really is quite simple. Since there are cast iron elements there that are presumably original, and the spandrel panel exists below the aluminum in probably rougher condition than all the other spandrels. So we think we would be able to recreate a reasonable facsimile of what McKimmie White would have done with the same details had the elevator bay been put in the original 1880s scheme. So what we're ending up with, and maybe we could look at the T2 drawing, what we would end up with is the color drawing.
Sorry.
In the other direction, yes, this one here. So on the right side is the upper bay already as it exists, the spandrel now covered, and the doors recreated to match the details and sort of the proportions with the rest of the building. On the service bay, the issue was much simpler. The service doors were missing. However, the side light existed, and we looked very carefully at the details, and they were very unusual. They're not standard, Dykes lumber details. These were very well proportioned details of both the glass surround and then the fixed panel below, the flat panel below. Yeah. So we think those, and you can't tell in the photographs, but we think those are the correct details, and I've have blow-ups of both. So really what we're doing is taking the door and using those details from the side light panel on that door, and just it's kind of a copy. So we're replacing in the master plan these two doors. We don't know yet what's going to happen. The other doors in the service bay, that service bay may ultimately change because there's a potential change of tenancy coming. So we'll see. And also to go back to the entrance doors, the actual details of the doors are improvised, a little bit reminiscent of McKimmie White's apartment house doors that you see on Fifth Avenue on the Upper East Side. There are very few doors of this type on commercial buildings dating back from McKimmie White's designs. Most of them were sort of grill work or other types, but I saw a few similar doors on the Upper East Side that by the same authors, and I didn't want to replicate any directly, but I think it fits. It's sort of a slightly modernized version of what the original would have been. All the same paint color that was approved before. And so that's a summary what we're trying to do here.
Okay, thank you. Just to recap, it was a lot of information. So there was a master plan that was approved in 2003. Since then, you have actually uncovered a lot of detail about the actual condition of the building, including the remaining historic fabric. And therefore, you are proposing to build something that is more historically contextual, but differs from what you would have been permitted to build under the master plan. And
That's
it
correct.
turns 2 bay infill entrance at the ground floor.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. Let's go to questions. Brad, any members of the committee who have their hand up who want to ask a question?
Is it the width of the double doors that required losing the columns and the pediments?
I'm sorry, I could hardly hear that.
The approved plan of 2003 with the columns and the pediment, are those doors narrower than what you have in the amended master plan up for this year?
Oh, yes, in the 2003 plan, yes, they are, because those were incorporated the 2 pediment, the 2 stone half columns and the details that Meineke Frank added. So their side lights are narrower, their doors are considerably narrower, and the whole effect ultimately does not seem to really work in the McKinney White scheme. So I think in 2003, I was a little bit more literal about this, and especially with what we found on the building, this is just too heavy. And I don't know, Jackie, was there that photograph of the Meineke and Frank? We discovered, or actually Jackie discovered, in the Avery archive, I think, or actually, I'm not sure. Anyhow, we discovered the photographs of that's not on the presentation, but
Okay, let me see.
those photographs of the Meineke and Frank scheme, just to show what we only had a drawing of that scheme originally, but actually we do have a photograph.
Do you see it on my screen right now? No, probably not. I think I have to switch. Is it okay if I show you guys a separate photograph?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hold on, I have to stop this one.
Oh, sorry, I introduced
okay.
something that extraneous, but it is an interesting photograph, and I have not seen it until literally a few months ago.
Yeah, is there any way you can blow it up?
I'm trying.
Can you zoom in?
I know I'm not great at this.
Bottom right hand.
Oh, I
Great.
see it.
Okay. Oh, I see.
There.
So it's the can you actually put your mouse on it so we know what you're referring to?
Can you see my mouse? Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's the Meineke Frank entrance to the elevator lobby. And they also added projecting storefront bays that are not original. The entrance on the left side with a pediment that's also not original. And then the whole projection is kind of almost a corner pavilion that they built in cast iron. That's where the original entrance in the McKinney and White scheme was. So that's all gone. All we have left now is very stripped down, flat, a flat facade in the 1950s style.
Okay. And what is the date of this photograph? Do you know?
This is from I think
1913.
13. Yes, there we go. It's the New York Public Library digital collection. Yes, that's what it is.
1930 or
1913. Yes.
13.
1913.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right, so this is the inspiration for the master plan.
The 1903 the 2003 master plan.
Got it.
So
Okay.
this is what we think now, considering what we found, is inappropriate. And so we're changing the inspiration to go back to McKinney and White's look to the best of our ability to reconstruct it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next question from members of the committee.
I have one, which is, to the best of your ability, do you know what the original doors at that main entrance location looked like? It's hard to tell from those photographs. I don't know if you have another hidden photograph up your sleeve or if there's a zoom in. But
No, the photograph that exists is very, very difficult to read.
Yeah.
They seem to be, I don't know if there's a way to blow that up, but it's hardly possible. They seem to have it seems to be mainly solid doors with smallish windows. So that's kind of the best information that we have.
thank you.
Okay. Actually, on the historic photograph, can you just locate us and show the scope of work that you're proposing?
So
it
here,
is- yes.
so this is the main entrance location we're talking about. And this is the location of the service entrance.
Got it. Okay, this is immensely helpful. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee?
I don't see any.
Okay, I have a couple of questions of my own. Can you actually just go over the materials that you're using for the doors?
The doors will be steel and painted with the automobile paint that was developed by Yablonsky Conservation to match the windows and to match the original finish.
Okay, and when you say steel, is it like solid steel or is it like stainless steel?
Probably solid steel. Yes, because stainless would not take the paint very well, but we're still working on the details of that.
Okay, but it will not be aluminum.
No.
Okay, and then you mentioned that you are going to replicate some cast iron elements and details. Can you speak to that?
Yes, we had already for the second floor work, we had a foundry somewhere in I think in South Carolina was replicating the originals. We actually took a piece of the original, we shipped it to them, or actually no, I think we made a plaster cast. And we shipped it to that foundry and they made replicas for us. So same process.
But in this particular instance, what is being replicated? What are the elements that are being replicated?
Well, on the service doors, those will be wood doors. The service doors are wood, so we replicate the wood details in the side light to create those doors. The cast iron part, I was talking about the main entrance doors.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because on the service bays, all the trim is existing. We're only changing the actual door and removing the frame that narrowed the opening down a bit from the original.
As you're changing the visuals, it's very hard to follow. So show us the element that is made out of cast iron that you are going to recreate.
So it's
and where is it?
It's everything below the spandrel panel in the main entrance. For the two posts, all the other details, all of this is the cast iron detailing, which we're going to be replicating from our existing model right above and also at the service bay.
So Alexander, should I zoom in on this, the framing?
Well, for instance, or you can show us, you can show there.
So this is the existing that you're pointing, but I want to know what is the proposed that you're going to install.
The proposed is everything below the spandrel on the drawing. So, Jackie, the drawing to the right, yeah, the vertical columns next to the doors and the horizontal details. This will be the cast iron detailing that's replicated from the panels above. And Jackie, if you could look, show the service bay, the details in the service bay around the existing doors, those are the prototypes of the details we'll use on the front. Those are the only extant sort of double that detail there. That's the column that we'd use surrounding the main entrance door. It's the only element that has this double sort of detail, and it's the right proportion to match what the entrance door would be, and the cast iron column that is behind the aluminum of the entrance door.
Okay, you said that the service doors have wood details. Are those wood details?
No, the
new doors will be wood.
service doors are wood,
Yeah.
and the trim
New
and the
doors
side
going
light is
here.
wood. The vertical details between the doors are cast iron.
Okay, got it. Thank you. When you present to LPC, you may want to find a way that you don't shift images like that. It's super hard to follow, and they only do remote. So
Right. We know. We apologize. We were rushing to get this presentation together for you for tonight. So we apologize. We couldn't format it in a more effective way.
No worries. We know how much work it takes. Okay, so that is helpful. So I have a good understanding. Members of the committee, do you have any other questions, maybe on other aspects of the proposal or on this particular subject? Any more questions? I don't see any hands going up. I actually have a follow-up question. So this is an amendment to the master plan. Are there other elements in the master plan that remain and that you're not altering, or are these the two remaining elements of the master plan that you have not yet constructed?
No, there are elements at the first floor that are not being constructed yet. The framing around the storefront windows is still the aluminum framing from the 1970s or 1960s. So the pieces below the spandrel in the rest of the bays is not original. The entrance doors to the store from the corner, those are not original. And so right now, those are not being touched.
Okay, but do you feel that the master plan is adequate to deal with these particular elements?
Everything except possibly the entrance to the storefront in the corner.
Got it. Okay.
But that is probably not being changed for now. I think we may have to come back when we find out who the next tenant is going to be. And in the context of that, we may want to revisit those doors.
Got it. Okay. And my understanding is that there is a new tenant for the entire ground floor. Is this tenant involved in this design?
No. This is purely the building entrances, both the commercial and the service entrance. The new tenants are not in yet. I actually don't know what exactly is going on yet. It's not confirmed.
Got it. Okay. All right. Very, very helpful. All right. I have no further question. Any more questions from members of the committee?
Yeah. Could you speak briefly to any changes in the ADA entrance elements of this new plan?
Actually, there aren't any here. The doors that are being put in are wider than the existing doors. These doors are 4 feet each in width, their center pivot. And they'll provide actually an effectively wider opening that's existing. Obviously, the opening forces and so on will have to work to comply with the regulations. And the service bay entrance are basically a replication in place. There is no level change. Nothing is triggering any configuration change.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, members of the committee?
I don't see any.
Okay, all right. So seeing none, I will open up to members of the public. Do we have any questions or comments on this application from members of the public? You can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. Okay, seeing none, Brad, do we have anyone in attendance tonight who wishes to speak on the application from members of the public?
No.
Okay, thank you. So let's move to a business session. Same preamble and framing. We are here to consider the appropriateness of what is being proposed. What is interesting is that there was a master plan that was approved in 2003. So for new members of the committee, a master plan is basically a sort of like framework that a building owner will propose to LPC that basically allows them to do work as tenants change and maybe new tenants come in. They don't have to apply every single time to the LPC to make a change in an entrance in a storefront infill. They basically know what LPC has approved. That's the master plan. And then if they go by the master plan, they can just pull their permit and construct it as per what was approved when the master plan was approved. So here the applicant wants to amend the master plan solely for those two particular elements. We do understand now that there are other elements of the master plan that have not yet been built and may be revisited or maybe built as per the master plan. So what is in front of us really is this particular amendment to the master plan appropriate both to the building, but also to the master plan itself. So with that framing in place, let's hear comments. Any comments?
Barbara?
I think it's actually an improvement over the original master plan. It looks like the right touch to my eye.
My money's on McKimmon White.
My only comment would be a suggestion to the team to maybe have a timeline. Like the original was 1880 something, if I remember, then there was this 1913 photograph. 1913. And then there's the 2003 plan, and now there's a new plan, but that references back to the 1886 design rather than the 1913 design. It just took me a little while to catch up, get all that.
Yeah, so you're correct. There has been a number of iterations, and what's interesting with these applications is that once again, the goal is not necessarily to go back to the original, and the goal is not necessarily to do a pastiche or reconstruction in kind to what existed back then. At times, it is absolutely what this committee will want to see, but at times, this is not necessarily what is found to be, the most appropriate. This building has gone through a number of alterations. I think that what happened in the 70s, we'll all agree was, very inappropriate. The building was not landmarked, and they made mistakes. That's okay. So the question really now is, how do we rectify these mistakes? And do we believe that this particular proposal is consistent with the building, or do we feel that the master plan that was approved in 2003 is a better option? And really in the context of how does it relate to the entire building as a whole? So it's lots of different iterations, but I think that really the question tonight is, what is being proposed, is it acceptable and appropriate for the building? Or is the 2003 version a better version? All right, more comments. I think we see where this one is going, but we want to hear a little more. Any more comments?
I have one, which is, I agree with basically what everyone else has said, which I think this change to the master plan is a vast improvement over the 2003 master plan. The only item from that I think that I would like maybe to see or to discuss is that these doors that we're looking right here on the screen on the right, to me, look a little too large and modern and glassy for what I'm seeing for the rest of the building, including some of the details that they're replicating elsewhere. And in the original 2003 master plan, the bottom rail or sill of those doors was a little bit taller, so it wasn't such a kind of a consistent opening throughout, and there was a little bit more differentiation between the side lights and the door. I personally would like to see that. I don't know if others feel the same way.
I will chime in. I agree with you. There's something about the proportion that is, I especially, looking just at this bay entrance and, not looking at how it relates to the upper floors and, the other bays. That seems a little out of proportion. I think that if Tony was here, Tony is really he's obsessed with symmetry, and he would probably note that, there's a lack of, vertical alignment between the upper portion of the bay entrance and the lower portion. So I agree with you. At the same time, looking at the application as a whole, I agree that it is an improvement. So maybe there's a way to note that as a recommendation, maybe an encouragement to the architect to look at this issue of proportion, while at the same time indicating to the Landmarks Preservation Commission that we don't have any major objection, unless, of course, we have major objections, which, once again, is totally fine. Just want to refine how much this is, concerning us in, the scale of our recommendation. So, do we have other members who are expressing the same concern as Brad and myself on the width and proportion of those doors and side windows? Any other comments? Any hands going up, Brad?
I don't see any in the room, no.
Okay. Okay, so maybe this is something that we note in the resolution. Are there, so let me ask you the question this way. Are there any strong objections to this application? Okay, so I see some hands shaking no. Okay, all right. So we're getting a clear idea of the temperature of the room on this one. So if there are no further comments, are we ready for a motion? Okay, so someone makes a motion.
Motion to approve with the note that we would like them to reconsider or to further study the proportions of the main entrance design.
Second.
And we have a second. Okay, excellent. All right, so we're ready to take this to a vote, and this will be the final vote of the evening.
Okay. Blake?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Hirschberg?
Yes.
It's gone. Logisico?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Myself and a yes. Spandorf?
Yes.
Stamberg?
Yes.
Zokowitz?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you very much. Best of luck to the applicant with the Landmarks Preservation Commission. As I said, we will pass the resolution at the full board I don't know from the top of my head when the meeting is. It's the second Thursday in July. So this is when the resolution will be forwarded to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. You are welcome to attend the full board meeting. It is not mandatory. You can choose to speak during the public session for 2 minutes if you choose to, and it's not mandatory for applicants to appear. But certainly you're welcome and encouraged to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Are there any new business from members of the committee? Any new business from members of the committee? Okay, so seeing no new business, we are ready to adjourn the meeting. And I wish you all a very good evening. Brad is raising his, yes, Brad, go ahead.
Let's circle back to the resolutions themselves. And we want to address that here or offline?
Yes, no, let's address this now. So, very unfortunately, given the haste in which we had to do these assignments and rearrange our schedules, it so happened that the initial assignments could not be fulfilled by those who were assigned these applications. So we need 2 volunteers to write the resolutions that we reviewed tonight.
If there's someone who knows how to do it, I'll volunteer to assist.
Excellent, excellent, fantastic. So Chuck and Zul, you will work together on let's say, can you do 455 Madison?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, and we need a volunteer for 900 Broadway.
I can do that one.
Excellent. I don't know who spoke, but God bless you.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, members of the committee, for your patience and your hard work, and for contributing such good conversation and reviewing these applications. Thank you so much. I wish you an excellent evening. I will see you in person for the full board in July. And until then, the meeting is adjourned. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
The hard, what is this? The hard to call it justice and joy together, justice and joy in the same concept.
It's a collective.
That's a good one. It was a good one.
It's a good one. Usually all the guests are all know we usually get there. So.
Okay.
Were the materials on the website I couldn't find on the Google Drive?
Yeah.
They were on there?
Yeah. Everything that was presented is on Google Drive. It's in that.
Yeah, likewise. All right, I'll give you a call.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great.
Very nice to meet you. And we didn't get to meet.
Oh, I'm Mark.
Mark Zul.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
There may be a like guide to writing resolution. I'll see if I can find.
I sent it. I
Yeah,
sent
it's
the
on there.
email.
It's on there.
I'll send it by.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, terrific. Okay, good.
Brevity is key.
Yeah, and thank
Yes.
Yes.
brevity is key. And thank you guys for
Restroom on the outside here.
yeah, take that code right there, memorize that, and then take a right. When you
Okay,
get that,
thanks.
thank you once over. So,
It's like early.
yeah, and I think we-
13th. Board meeting? The 13th, I think so. I have in my calendar.
It's on the CPI calendar as well, and then just this.
I think that's how old it is.
Yeah, that would be fairly busy. Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it might actually be easier than doing it from scratch and having to like go to the thing and everything, so. All right, anyway, your work, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I literally just been out of pocket last week, but we're good for it, so.
Do I have to stop this?
Yes,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
it's just like any Zoom,
Okay,
on the
normal,
phone, so
yeah.
and meeting for all.
Yeah.
And then second question, which is, Suzanne left early, she had to go do something. She left during the presentation for the second item and told me the way that she would like to vote. Is that an acceptable way or no?
I'm not sure. I think it depends on how far into the presentation she was. I mean, if
She saw that-
clearer than most of it, and then just didn't stay for the question.
She saw, I believe she left after the applicant's full presentation, but did not stay at all for any of the questions or any of the other bits that
I think technically that.
I'll check with her.
Check with Lila.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if she must be really be actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think she would have voted this way had she stayed. I just worry about the precedent.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you can do that. I mean, I'd have to like read the bylaw. I just don't remember
Sure.
that. You'd have to like look, read the bylaw, but you have to physically. In the way.
Yeah, I know.
No one's good to.
Oh,